Welcome in, everyone, and thank you for listening to the 245th ever episode of the Missouri Sports Podcast. Brought to you by 106 Apparel and recording from the Revel Advertising Studio. No. MSP Studio in beautiful Springfield, Missouri. I'm one of your hosts, Cameron Albert, alongside my good friend and fellow Mizzou fan, Kyle DeVries. How are you doing today, Kyle?
I'm doing great, Cameron. How about you?
We owed Revel one last shout out.
It'll probably happen again.
I guess.
You doing well?
I'm doing well. Busy time of year.
Yeah.
I work at a school. I am going to school to get my master's.
You're about to graduate from college.
Yeah. So trying to wrap up 2 semesters at the same time. It's a little busy, but it's all good.
Have you been watching any of the NBA playoffs?
No.
Never mind then. It's been kind of fun.
Yeah.
8 seed Miami Heat knocked off the 1 seed Milwaukee. They're about to make it to the conference finals, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's a little bit of a flatter landscape than maybe there has been in previous years. That makes for fun playoffs.
Yeah, it's been pretty fun.
How's LeBron doing? They still in?
I honestly haven't watched much of that series because those West Coast games are always past my bedtime. But yeah, they're winning their series versus Golden State.
Who are you pulling for? You like Jason Tatum?
Yeah. I like the Heat. I like that 8 seed story. I don't really want Philadelphia to get any further, but I think they're a game up on Boston now.
What's wrong with Philadelphia?
I don't know. James Harden, Joel Embiid, that's not doing anything for me.
How do you feel about the step back?
The step back?
Yeah.
James Harden step back?
Is that a walk?
No. Yeah, I'm rooting for Jason Tatum. I'm rooting for the Lakers because LeBron.
But you didn't know if they're still in or not?
I know they're a game up on Golden State.
That's true. You knew that.
I kind of like watching Phoenix, super entertaining because Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. But
Devin Booker and Jason Tatum and MPJ.
Yeah, all doing well in the NBA playoffs.
Cool.
Welcome in, everyone.
Not sure what that was.
Yeah, so I have been watching more NBA than baseball, that's for sure. But I saw something where the last time the Cardinals had a losing record, Mizzou football won 12 games.
Okay.
So I'm all in on that.
That's a trade-off you're willing to make.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm a Cardinals fan, but that's not even. I don't have to think about that one.
No. Yeah. We take that deal instantly. What all are we talking about this week? We have some new additions to the Mizzou football team. And of course, we are following up on what we talked about last week with the recruiting classes, trying to figure out if what's happened with the 2021 class is out of the ordinary. And we're still trying to figure out if we should panic yet or not. So before we get into all that, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, leave us a review wherever you listen to us. And of course, you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Missouri Sports Pod. Before we get into all of our analysis that we did, Mizzou added all conference guard from Houston, Cameron Johnson. Everybody's happy for that.
Wow, that scared me. Yeah, this is incredible. This is a fantastic news for Mizzou football that I feel like we needed a little bit of just something good to happen.
Yeah.
And this is better than good in my opinion. This is maybe the highlight of the offseason so far. Cameron Johnson, 6'4", 305. 2 years of eligibility still left. He is an offensive lineman transferring from Houston. As a freshman, he appeared in 13 games. That's 669 snaps, which is unheard of for a freshman lineman.
Yeah, even at Houston, wherever.
Right. Yeah. As a sophomore, you alluded to this, first team All AAC last year, started all 13 games at left guard, did not allow a sack in the final 11 games. So this is a lineman that's probably going to walk in and be Missouri's best lineman and probably a top 10 lineman in the SEC. Following his offensive line coach, who was at Houston, Brandon Jones is now at Missouri. So that was why we were able to to be in the Cameron Johnson sweepstakes, but I'm very happy that we were.
Yeah, I saw he allowed 1 sack in 556 opportunities at Houston.
Yeah. Now, obviously, when you're playing on the interior, you're probably not facing those edge rushers like you are at tackle, but still a fantastic accomplishment and just the definition of stability.
So now he's going to come in, start day one, but where will he start on the offensive line?
Yeah, that's the question. Missouri really struggled last year on the offensive line. Bence Polgar, who was the center from Buffalo, was ineligible. Connor Tollison was kind of thrown into the fire as a young guy who had to learn how to play the center position. It didn't go very well. He played guard in high school, and Connor Tollison was, he was highly rated come out of high school. I still think he's a very talented lineman. I think some Mizzou fans feel like they're maybe ready to give up on him, but I would not do that. But I think it's very possible Cameron Johnson might be playing center for Missouri next year, and Connor Tollison is maybe playing guard, or maybe Connor Tollison is going to improve, because that's very much something that college players do.
Yeah.
Is develop and improve over their time.
And especially at the center position, like you need some reps to be super comfortable with everything that you have to do there.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't know, man. I think Cameron Johnson, if I had to guess, I guess it's playing guard, but it's kind of a coin flip at this point. I think he could be playing center or guard. Either way, I think it's going to make the line a lot better.
Yeah, huge addition. And no matter where, if he ends up at center, then I will feel best about the situation if somebody else steps up and is takes the starting center position, and he can just not have to worry about all that and just be the best offensive lineman he can be at guard.
Yeah. Drink was specifically critical of the offensive line still this spring.
Yeah.
So that's still going to be an issue. It never wasn't going to be, but this helps tremendously.
So who's our top 5 on the offensive line right now?
I'd say probably I'm going to go Cameron Johnson, Z Powell, who is going to be playing left tackle, Marcellus Johnson, who I would guess is going to be playing right tackle, and he's the transfer from Eastern Michigan. And the interior is really where we just don't really know what's going to happen. So if Cameron Johnson's playing center, I'm going to guess the guards are probably Xavier Delgado, and then either Connor Tollison or Armand Mimbou, probably. That's probably the top 6. I don't really know how exactly it's going to shake out, but Mimbou was playing tackle last year, so I can't remember if he typically played interior in high school or what he's best suited for, but he's very, very good. So I think they'll probably try and get him in there if they can.
And he'll just be a true sophomore?
Yeah.
Whew. Okay. Well, I think as it stands right now, we should expect better offensive line play than last year.
For sure.
And
anything other than that would be a massive
That's
letdown.
true. Yeah, you couldn't get any worse, really. So, I don't want to think about what it would have looked like worse, but we should see a noticeable improvement there.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so there's been, this is not really a huge news item. Nothing's really changed here, except Coach Drinkwitz said recently that Brady Cook, I can't remember the exact wording, but he alluded to the idea that it's Brady Cook's job because he was the starter last year, and we have challengers that are competing with him. It was not, he specifically decided to frame it that way versus it's anybody's job, full competition, let's see who wins it. First of all, do you think that he's being completely truthful there, that's how he sees it? Is this just a motivational thing? And second, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, I think he's telling the truth. I'm not sure anything's really changed, which, I think Brady Cook's back and practicing now and everything. He had shoulder surgery in the offseason, but as far as I know, I think he's good to go there.
Yeah.
It didn't sound like anybody really pulled away in the spring. They had an opportunity, and maybe he isn't being 100% truthful, but, Brady Cook is easily just as likely to win the job as anybody else, in my opinion. So it's going to be a wild one.
So with let's say best case scenario, we've got a noticeably improved offensive line. with Brady Cook back out there, he showed enough last year to where we can be pretty optimistic, I think, right? With this new and improved offensive line?
Yeah. I think we can be
With the
optimistic.
weapons that he has?
Yeah. I don't think I'm jumping for joy if Brady Cook is our quarterback again, but I'm not necessarily going to be like upset about it either. It's just weird, man. There's so many levels to this conversation, and we've a conversation we've had a few times where Brady Cook maybe doesn't offer that upside that the other options do, but at the same time, if we're trying to win 8 games, I might just say give me Brady Cook is the most likely option to do that.
Yeah. Quarterback spot is that's not where you invite variance in your outcomes. You don't want to be like, give me the high floor, or give me that high ceiling, but also the low floor. You don't necessarily want the guy, if all the other pieces are working well, you don't really want a guy that's going to lose you a game.
Yeah, in the scenario that Missouri has where they're pretty solid at a lot of places, I think you're probably right, where they're not looking to potentially go young and risky.
But I think a lot of Mizzou fans, and I would include myself in this, would have thought that like Sam Horn going into this season would not be viewed as risky.
Right.
I think we would have liked to believe that he would be like his floor would be about the same as Brady Cook's floor, but with a higher ceiling.
Right. But with the rushing upside that Brady Cook has, though, he kind of offers something that Sam Horn doesn't in like this safety net.
Yeah.
Where he kind of got us out a lot of weird spots with his legs. So
that's true.
It's one of those things. I don't know. I don't think Brady Cook has a ceiling, obviously, but I still think that he can be he can improve individually. And also I think the situation has improved also potentially. So
yeah. Oof.
I don't know.
Okay. Still a long ways to go with that.
Long ways to go.
Another addition from Mizzou football was defensive end transfer Niles Gaddy from Jackson State.
Yeah, it was. When was this? Like Saturday or something like that. This was like both of these commitments came within like 15 minutes of each other or something. So
and we needed it.
It was great day to get 2 experienced transfers in both positions of need. But yeah, Niles Gaddy, 6'6", 250, so good size. Had a great year at Jackson State FCS last year. Obviously, that's a little bit of a unique FCS program. But I guess in 2021 is the most recent season I found. I don't know if he played last year or not. But in 2021, he had 34 tackles, 4 sacks, and 5 tackles for loss in 12 games. And he's got 2 years of eligibility.
On the Jackson State website for 2022, played in 12 games, 40 tackles, 7 sacks.
Okay, so he played 2 years at Jackson State?
Yep. 11 tackles for loss, including 7 sacks.
Yeah. Yeah, so we saw that with, literally just got signed. We talked about him in the NFL draft.
Who are we talking about?
The Missouri lineman who came up from FCS last season and was really solid.
Darius Robinson?
No, I forget I said it. We've seen where, like, these transfers that have experience, even if it's at the FCS level, can, like, contribute much more reliably than high school recruits, at least in the first year. So I just kind of feel like you pretty much every season have to be adding at least 1 or 2 of these types of players, even if it's from an FCS level. Just go find a hyper-productive player with the measurables and see what happens.
Yeah, I feel like I'm surprised that he didn't end up in Colorado, honestly.
Right.
They seem like they would have...
They're taking anybody these days.
Exactly.
Including Arden Walker.
Yeah. In a shock to nobody, he committed to Colorado from the transfer portal.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, 2 really good additions. I mean, I've seen... You had him at 6'6", 250. I saw 6'4", 230. So
he's somewhere in there.
We'll see what happens when he gets on the official roster.
He's tall,
but
big.
Yeah, so I mean, I think I'm ready to see a guy that can line up on the end and just get after the quarterback. I feel like, I don't know, that's takes such it takes a special player, I think, to really make an impact there. but when they can do it, it just makes everything easier for the defense.
Oh, yeah.
And we've seen that before with Mizzou defenses where we're just not creating pressure of any kind. And even when we have a good secondary, doesn't really matter too much because you can't guard somebody forever.
Right.
Cover somebody forever. So, two solid additions there. Now, last week we talked about the transfers out of the program, specifically from the class of 2021. And we went back quite a ways here. We did a little bit of research, and we're going to talk about some of these older Mizzou recruiting classes and how many of these high school players came in and contributed to Mizzou on the field, and then some big misses that were like highly rated guys that didn't pan out, and sort of how the transfer market in and out of Mizzou football has looked over the last 10 years or so. And we tried to figure out if there was any trends that we could see clearly. But basically going back to, I looked at 2011 and 2012 just for fun, basically. And some of these names, I just wanted to get a little nostalgic here a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like 2011 recruiting class was 48th in the country. Only 17 commitments, but among those were 3-star players Shane Ray and Kentrell Brothers, 4-star Sheldon Richardson, but this was the first time he was on Mizzou, or he committed to Mizzou, then he went JUCO and then came back. We see that a few times throughout these recruiting classes. But Connor McGovern was part of this 2011 class, and then 2012, kind of a legendary class with DGB, Evan Boehm, Matty Mock, Sean Culkin, Russell Hansbrough, Marcus Golden. So a lot of names there.
Mm-hmm.
That was maybe, and then I'll let you pick it up with 2013, but I feel like that 2012 class might have been like one of the peaks for Mizzou football recruiting in like the Rivals recruiting index age. So that was a fun one to look at. But you did a better job of really looking at like the percentage of hits. And obviously a lot of this is subjective, so it's not an exact science. But go ahead. Take it away starting in 2013. And then, I'll jump in here and there.
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to say the guy I was trying to think of a minute ago. It was DJ Coleman.
Of course, yeah.
Who was the FCS transfer, who was honestly maybe Missouri's, one of the X factors of Missouri's defensive line last year, and was one reason why the defense was so good. Signed with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I apologize for DJ Coleman. But yeah, the purpose of this exercise, I feel like, we've been looking at the past couple of classes. Obviously, the 2021 class, which we'll talk about eventually, is, I think people have kind of pointed to it recently as, we've had some departures there. Is this normal? Do we, how many contributors do we normally have in a class? And so I thought it would be interesting, to go back and just look at all these classes. How many guys are we normally hitting on per class? Are these guys normally sticking around? Are they transferring out? And it was just kind of conceptually interesting to see like the changes over the years. And it's kind of, there was like this duality of a little bit of depression when you think about how few guys are hitting per class, but also kind of this reality that it's just really not worth getting too high or too low about recruits on the individual level. Like if we miss out on a recruit, it's like, that's fine.
Yeah.
He's probably not going to be good anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, just because
just playing the odds.
Playing the odds. All of these classes, like hit rates are 30%, like for the most part, depending on how you want to define a hit. So, like you said, a lot of subjectivity here, but I was kind of thinking of a hit as someone who contributed or was on the field a lot, even if they weren't that great. If they're out there on the field contributing, I consider that a hit because so many of these players are never seeing the field.
Yeah. And I was kind of thinking hit, and I was using major contributor sort of interchangeably.
Right. 2013 was the first year I looked at.
One thing I want to mention real quick about all of these older classes, going back to 2011 is just like, it's so obvious looking at the results of what happened to these individual players. It's so clear the impact of the transfer portal on college football.
Oh, yeah.
You can see it happening. You can see the progression just within the Mizzou signing classes, how when that comes into play and when it makes a big difference.
For sure. Okay, so in 2013, we had 21 total commits, and I said we had 6 hits, which is about 28% hit rate. Some of the hits that I said were that we had in 2013, Charles Harris, Josh Augusta, Eric Beisel, Jamon Moore, Anthony Sherrills, and Arion Penton. 2 pretty notable misses we had were Chase Abington and Eddie Prince.
Yeah.
The team rank for this class was 41st. So, right off the bat, Charles Harris, one of the most unique recruiting stories that Missouri has had ever, maybe. First round draft pick, and was probably not even on, like, and by the way, all this stuff is like from Rivals, like the team rankings and stuff like that. I don't even think he had a Rivals ranking when the day he committed to Missouri.
Out of 21 commits, according to Rivals, Charles Harris was 20th as far as his rating on Rivals.com.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, right off the bat, pretty terrible hit rate.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me to see, like, if you sort it by Rivals rating, the top 3 or 4 guys versus like the bottom 5 or 6 guys, we're basically hitting on guys just as often from the bottom half of the class as the top half.
Yep, and that continues on.
And sometimes it's like the lowest rated guy of the entire recruiting class.
Right. 2014. Now this is the biggest class that we had by far that I looked at in the last decade. We had 28 commits. It was ranked 34th by Rivals as a total team rank. We had 9 total hits for about 32% of the class, and those hits were Walter Brady, Brandon Lee, Ish Witter, maybe not the greatest player, but he was out there, Nate Brown, Thomas Wilson, Logan Cheadle, Paul Adams, Kevin Pendleton, and Kendall Blanton. So, this is a weird one where it's like none of those guys were stars, like literally none of them, but they were out there just playing a lot of snaps.
Yeah, but you can see in that recruiting class with the amount of guys that were successful to some extent, you can see the foundation of some of the better teams of, like, the Barry Odom era.
Yeah.
You can see that kind of foundation being built there.
Yeah, and like not many of those guys probably came in and played early, but just kind of stuck around and developed.
Right, and the fact that there's no names there that were like, first, 3 round draft picks. It's like, oh yeah, so it kind of makes sense that there's this solid core of guys that could get you to 8 wins or so, maybe.
Nobody was too good to draw the attention of, maybe those blue bloods or whatever.
Exactly. But you didn't have enough star power to take you over the top and have a really special season.
Right. Some notable misses from this 2014 class: Andy Bauer, Marvin Zanders, Greg Taylor.
Marvin Zanders, best Mizzou spring game player ever. Him and Michael Wilson, probably.
Yeah, he would just, ramble off on some huge breakaway run or something like that. And then just another thing that I kind of wanted to throw in here were just a couple of like JUCO transfers per class and stuff like that. Most impactful JUCO guy this class is Kenya Dennis. In 2015, we had 25 commits, and Rivals rank was 27th. Some big hits were Terry Beckner Jr., Therese Hall, Jonathan Johnson, Emmanuel Hall, Drew Locke, and Cam Hilton. So kind of the opposite of the class before it, where it's like maybe not as many, but all of these guys were really good for the most part.
Yeah, so bring in the star power. Yeah. And it's gonna add up to be a pretty solid team here in a couple of years.
Yeah, so 6 total hits there for about 24% of the class. Some notable misses: Marquise Doherty, who was a running back who I think was also playing baseball. AJ Harris was a 4-star offensive lineman who never played much. I think he retired early for like injury stuff. And then Nate Strong. Very impactful JUCO transfer we had was Marcel Frazier, who I believe was drafted.
And worth pointing out here, 25 guys committed, 23rd, Jonathan Johnson, 18th, Emmanuel Hall. And I don't remember if you counted him as a hit, but 17th was Rashad Floyd.
Okay, moving on to 2016, we had 22 commits. So every year it seems like we're kind of less commits than the year before. This had a team rank of 47. Major hits: Cale Garrett, Demaria Crockett, DeMarcus Acey, Albert O, Tucker McCann, Trey Williams, Tristan Castillo, and Trevor Sims. Cale Garrett, I'm pretty sure on signing day or like the day before signing day, they were like, we probably need an extra linebacker. You want to call Cale Garrett? He's committed to Navy. Let's see if we can flip him.
Yeah.
And they did.
Yeah.
And he ends up probably being the best player in that class other than Albert O.
And Demaria Crockett was committed to Boise State. Yeah.
So that had a few more hits. That had 9 hits, roughly probably 38%. You also threw in Christian Holmes. I forgot to mention Christian Holmes.
So interesting to note here with Christian Holmes, this is the first time since 2011 that we see a guy who contributes a decent amount to Mizzou football transferring to another Power 5 program. Previously,
And playing.
Previously, I mean, even
in general,
even going there, like players that signed to Mizzou were either like not playing and then falling off the face of the earth, or contributing eventually, or even just being a backup as an upperclassman. But it's like they were staying all 4 years, or we were just never hearing from them again after a year or two.
Yeah, it's really bizarre.
But then here, 2016 recruiting class, that means in a couple years, the transfer portal's getting spun up a little bit, and it's starting to happen.
Notable misses in this class: Harry Ballard and Brendan Scales, who is the tight end that we flipped from Alabama on signing day.
Harry Ballard was going to be good.
Yeah, he was.
There's an alternate universe.
According to me.
There's an alternate universe out there where he was like a all-conference player.
Yeah. I think we saw Harry Ballard a couple of times, actually. I think he left and came back 2 years later.
Didn't qualify, and then they recruited him again, and he committed again, and then still didn't
do anything. Yeah. Okay, 2017, we had 25 commits. Our team rank on Rivals was 49th, still in the Barry Odom era. We had 7 hits for a percentage of 28%. The hits were Kobe Whiteside, Tyree Gillespie, Larry Roundtree, Josh Bledsoe, Chris Turner, Case Cook, and Larry Borum. Anything there?
Tyree Gillespie and Kobe Whiteside, the very bottom of the ratings. Kobe Whiteside, 25th out of 25.
Larry Borum maybe even comes to mind as a guy who was like pretty lowly ranked, but just like had an incredible size. He was just like, he was like 300 plus pounds when he came in.
Yeah.
And just ended up being just this absolute stalwart of a right tackle, and I think is still playing for the Chicago Bears.
And one of the rare 4-star commits from before the Drinkwitz era, at the top of the list with a 5.8 rating on Rivals is Deron Davis,
who never makes it to campus.
No. And Kobe Whiteside, 25th out of 25. Tyree Gillespie, 22nd. Joshua Bledsoe, 13th. So the guys that are like, these guys were staying in the program, developing, and then producing as upperclassmen.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, to some extent, pretty good talent evaluation here on some of these guys. Josh Bledsoe was not playing the same position in high school that he played at Mizzou, so they were able to kind of find a spot for him, and he ended up being really good.
Larry Roundtree, one of the most productive running backs in Mizzou history, just a 3-star guy from North Carolina.
Yep. Notable misses from this class: Taylor Powell, Aubrey Miller, who didn't do anything in Mizzou, but ended up transferring to Jackson State and did pretty well there. Like you mentioned, Deron Davis, and then Logan Christofferson. Just an absolute nebulous tight end situation for years, other than Alberto.
Yeah.
A couple of really impactful JUCO guys in that class were Yasir Durant, who played in the NFL, and then Walter Palmer as well, I think was drafted. 2018, we had 26 commits. Our team rank was 39. maybe the best class that we'll talk about potentially as far as guys that aren't at Mizzou anymore. Actually, there are a couple of guys that are still there. But the hits were Towski Dove, Tyler Beatty, Xavier Delgado, Nick Bolton, Trajan Jeffcoat, Javon Foster, Jarvis Ware, Daniel Parker Jr., Chad Bailey, and Jalen Knox. So that was 10 hits for 38%.
Yeah, and even like Daniel Parker Jr. and Jalen Knox transferred out of the program even after having success at Mizzou. So this is the class that I think basically catches us up to modern day transfer portal mania every offseason, where coaches talk about having to recruit their whole team back to their program. But interestingly, there's 3 guys here in this recruiting class that transfer to Ole Miss, Houston, and Jeffcoat transferred to Arkansas. But Jalen Knox transferred to Ole Miss, did nothing. Cam Scott transferred to Houston, did nothing, and is no longer on the team. So
Daniel Parker Jr. to Oklahoma.
Daniel Parker Jr. transferred to Oklahoma,
Didn't
and
do much.
I have no idea what he did. I didn't watch a second of Oklahoma football.
Least productive season of his career, I'm pretty sure.
And we'll see what Jeffcoat does this coming year at Arkansas.
Towski Dove transferred down. See, that's another thing also with the transfer portal. It's like these guys are transferring up or out or whatever, but also maybe they kind of feel like they're recruited over, and maybe the coaching staff says, hey, you're going to have a more productive season at, a step down. You might just consider looking around. I don't know what happened with Towski Dove, but I think that's a situation where he was a contributor, ended up transferring, and I don't know where he went, but somewhere maybe just a slight step down.
Yeah, and but at the top, this is an interesting class because at the top of the class, according to Rivals, Chad Bailey, still on the team, going to contribute as a redshirt senior. At the very bottom of the list, out of 26 guys, 26th and 25th, two-star recruits by the name of Javon Foster and Tyler Beatty.
That's absolutely wild. I mean, you just have to think about high school recruiting. Obviously, on an individual level is not reliable, but when they're making these star ratings, they're probably looking at measurables. They're looking at what they would consider, this prediction as, how they predict in the future, not high school production, because Tyler Beatty would not have been a 2-star player, but he was undersized and all that stuff.
He was listed, coming out of high school, listed at 5'9", 168.
Yeah. Jarvis Ware had an interesting career arc, very productive early on at cornerback for Missouri. Some weird stuff happened, maybe some disciplinary stuff. Transferred, I don't remember where he ended up or what happened after that.
We did see the return of Antar Thompson in the 2018 recruiting class.
Antar Thompson first committed in 2013, resurfaced in 2018.
Very strange situation there. And unfortunately, it was cool to see him actually get to Mizzou eventually, but didn't really do anything.
Yeah. Notable misses, Messiah Swenson, and then Lindsey Scott Jr., who is a JUCO transfer of some kind. He played it at several different schools.
Yeah. And Cam Scott, it's interesting to look at some of these guys like Cam Scott. That's the type of player who we weren't seeing a lot of in earlier recruiting classes. A guy who is a young player who gets some snaps, produces to some extent, and then just doesn't really work out anywhere. So some of these departures from the program are so random and so inexplicable from the outside that it's important to remember when we eventually get to the 2021 class that this is just sort of normal. This is just how it works.
2019, we had 22 commits, team rank of 34 on Rivals. I only had 5 hits for 23% of the class. And those guys were Darius Robinson, Devin Nicholson, Isaiah McGuire, Martez Manuel, and Connor Bazelak.
One name that was kind of fringe, maybe Jelani Williams was around the program, but with him being the top guy on the list, I would just expected a lot more from him.
Yep, I actually just wrote him down as a miss.
Yeah.
That's probably controversial, maybe because he did play quite a bit, but he never took a hold of that starting job. And yeah, a massive recruiting win, in-state kid, 4-star.
Yeah.
And never just lived up to it. And so I wrote him as a miss. Jamie Petway, CJ Boone, Jack Buford, Maurice Massey were all guys that, were exciting and just never did anything.
CJ Boone and Buford transferred to New Mexico.
I believe you're right.
And Maurice Massey, I looked it up. He ended up at Southeast Louisiana. But then another just bottom of the list guy, Isaiah McGuire, 19th out of 22. And I'd say it worked out okay there.
Yeah, I think so. Connor Bazelak, interesting situation there. Transferred to Indiana, pretty mediocre there still.
Has transferred again.
Bowling Green.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's just gonna keep going down a little bit, just earning the starting job at the next level down, and yeah. In 2020, maybe the smallest class we'll talk about, we had 18 commits for a team rank of 54. So if you recall, 2020 was obviously COVID as well as a coaching change. So Barry Odom's out, and Coach Drinkwitz has about a month or two to throw together a class. And all things considered, I think that went pretty well. We had 6 hits for about 33% of the class. Ennis Rakestraw, of course, famous commitment on signing day. Chris Abrams-Drain. This is the first time I'm now introducing kind of what I would say is kind of a projected hit because he's still pretty young, but I think is going to be good, and that's Johnny Walker. Brady Cook, Jalen Carlisle, and Harrison Mevis.
Yeah, that's pretty solid. I mean, all things considered there with the coaching change and trying to keep a class together and add guys to it late in the game, that's pretty solid.
Yeah. Notable misses, Elijah Young, just because of the recruiting prowess and kind of disappointed. Javen Hester, which is a 4-star guy from Tulsa who actually ended up transferring up after not doing anything at Missouri. And Jay Macklin.
Transferring to Oklahoma is transferring up. Transferring to the Big 12 is transferring up.
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's a horizontal move.
I want to correct the record there.
Thank you. Notable JUCO transfer, Zeke Powell.
Yeah. Did you talk about misses already?
Kind of.
Jay Macklin.
Yep.
Is he at North Texas now? Is that right?
Yes.
And Chris Abrams-Drain going to go to the NFL.
Yes.
Ennis Rakestraw going to go to the NFL.
I think so.
In some capacity.
Yeah, I think so.
Brady Cook going to go to the NFL.
Yes.
After what he does this year.
Absolutely.
People will start talking about him.
That new offensive line.
Yeah, new offensive coordinator.
Exactly.
It's going to happen. Just kidding. Wish him the best, obviously.
He's going to do that Anthony Richardson surge.
That would be quite a deal. Yeah, sign me up for that, I guess. Yeah.
I was looking at their stats. I was comparing Anthony Richardson after the season to Brady Cook. Almost identical stats as far as rushing yards and passing yards. Anthony Richardson's production was so disappointing.
Kyle's model has Brady Cook.
They're basically the same.
Yeah.
They're basically the same prospect.
Yeah. I'll tell the NFL that.
That was sarcasm.
That was 2020.
That was 2020. I got too many papers. Okay, moving on to 2020.
So now this is the class.
It's the class.
Where it's all falling apart.
Is it?
Well,
Yeah,
that's what we're trying to decide.
That's what we're trying to figure out. We got 23 commits with a team rank of 19, which is the best we'd seen in many years. This is where it gets a little sad because we've got 4 guys who I think we can declare our hits. Those are Dominic Lovett, Damian Wilson, Dalen Carnell, and Makai Wingo. 2 of those players are now at other SEC schools. Makai Wingo had a pretty solid year at LSU, and Dominic Lovett projects to start at Georgia.
Okay, we got to take a time out here. Did you see his interview with another Georgia player where he talked about his recruitment and everything like that?
I think I didn't watch it, but I
Yeah.
think I pretty much got the gist of it.
Yeah. So if it's on YouTube, if you haven't seen it, the main thing that I wanted to point out was he specifically says, and I can't even remember the catalyst that caused him to decommit from Arizona State. I guess it could have been Herm Edwards getting fired.
I think so.
But anyway, he specifically talks about in this interview his mom, who was helping him through the whole recruiting process, obviously, basically saying, looks to me like we have two options here. We can reopen the commitment or you can go to Mizzou. Because he said Mizzou was just always there. Like, he was familiar with the coaches. He had been on campus because it's in his backyard. And that was like, he didn't even have to. Basically, he was saying to reopen his recruitment completely and start fielding new offers and open all that up was going to be too much stress for the point that he was at in his season and all that stuff. And he just knew that Mizzou would take him in a heartbeat. And that's what happened. So you can't help but read into that there was never really the fit or the match that he wanted. And he also divulged that Georgia and Tennessee were the only two SEC programs that came calling once he hit the transfer portal. He mentioned Arizona and Oregon as other schools that reached out, but he also said he absolutely was going to try to stay in the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, if I really want to take the high road and to have a very mature take on it, it is. I guess I'm still happy that he ended up at Missouri and we got one elite season out of him. Our offense would have just been detestable last year without him, and I hope that it's not this year because I think he was that good that he was kind of making the offense function at many times in the year. I think we'll be fine. I think we'll move on and it'll be just fine. But I hate to say it, he's a fantastic player, and he will probably be in the NFL in a year or two.
And Wingo, the situation with him following his former high school coach to LSU,
right?
That's hard to overcome a little bit.
Yeah, it's like can we look at this as these individual cases? And I don't know. Is it just kind of some unlucky stuff going on here? Maybe, maybe not. Is this a trend? Maybe, maybe not. A couple of guys I wrote down as like just too early to tell, but probably will be hits if we're looking at this 5 years from now. Connor Tollison, Ryan Horskamp, and Kyron Montgomery are all guys that are still at Missouri. But if you're looking at the guys who are for sure hits and have played and are good, and I think we know that about them already, that are still at Missouri is Damian Wilson and Dalen Carnell. So out of the whole class, that we've got two for sure hits. That's not great. Probably more will emerge, but already we know about some pretty significant misses in B.J. Harris, Zachary Lovett, Tyler Macon, and Travian Ford. You mentioned Travian Ford last week. That was pretty noticeable miss whenever he's a 4-star guy in state, one of the first commits of the class, and just never sees the field.
Yeah, I mean, he was a guy that, like, if we were back when we were looking at this 2021 class and what the prospects looked like for Mizzou, it was like, okay, we got to try to keep him away from Notre Dame and those type of schools. And it felt like, I just couldn't wait to get him on campus and see him develop a little bit. And it just never materialized. He was not earning playing time, not winning position battles ever, basically.
A couple of JUCO situations. We got Realist George and Jadarius Perkins. Interesting situation where he was a pretty big recruiting win at the time, beat out some big schools. He enrolled at Missouri, and then just maybe like a few weeks or months or days later, he transferred to Florida. And I don't know what happened after that.
No, I don't either.
Have a great life. Okay, we can talk about 2022 real quick, just kind of the outlook for that class, and then maybe we can tie a bow on everything we just talked about. But so 2022, we had 20 commits, team rank of 12, which obviously had a lot to do with Luther Burden. But I think, honestly, though, from top to bottom, it was a really good class. Some guys that I think I would project to be hits if we're looking at it 5 years down the road. Luther Burden, Valen Erickson is guy who I think has a chance to be really good at tackle here in the next year or two. I think he could emerge. Tavoris Jones, electric running back that I think will hopefully we
should
him,
know by the end of this year.
Might take off this year for sure. Armand Membao, we already know he's already showed us more than the typical freshman lineman ever shows. I wrote Sam Horn in here. I still am keeping the faith that we're going to see Sam Horn, lead the show. But still yet to be determined, obviously. Mekhi Miller, a guy I love. I think he's going to be a great player at Mizzou.
He's already shown flashes.
Yes. Isaac Thompson, Marquise Graciel, and DJ Wesolak are guys that none of those three have played yet, to my knowledge, but I think still have a great chance to contribute and be solid.
Yeah, so those guys, those last 3 or 4 you mentioned, are guys that have the recruiting pedigree to where these are guys that, looking back 3 or 4 years from now, we are crossing our fingers that they are, producing more and more as they grow into the program and are leading the team to new heights as juniors and seniors.
We did have one departure already from this class. That was Marcus Scott Jr. A JUCO transfer is Demarion Houston, Peanut Houston, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if we hit on, some of the guys we just mentioned that are still young and have the recruiting pedigree, and some of the guys that we've already seen, we're looking at a 40% hit rate for this class, which is really, really good and better than any other class we saw. So it's like we've got this weird, balance where we're trying to hit on everybody, but we don't want them to blow up too much because they might transfer out. And so it's just this weird thing where, I think that's just the world we're living in. If I had to try and guess what's going on with 2021, I'm concerned about the effects of this down the road whenever this class is supposed to be seniors, and we need that experienced class to kind of lead the way. There's not going to be very many guys left, and I think that's where the transfer portal can help to supplement where we might be trying to fill some holes. But yeah, I think that we can say that simultaneously the 21 class is a concern, but also I don't think it's a trend necessarily.
Yeah, so if I'm trying to sort of diagnose the situation here, the Missouri had just not really had the opportunity to have guys poached away from other big name programs because, one, each recruiting class, we were not really getting that many guys that were, that their recruiting caliber, their prospect caliber, even made sense for them to show up day one and contribute. Mm-hmm.
Team ranks 19 and 12 the last 2 years. We weren't doing that before.
Right. So, you look back at these recruiting classes from, the mid 2010s, and you're not seeing 4 and 5 4-star players. Yeah. That just wasn't happening. And it is... I have to think that if Lovett and Wingo don't transfer out, obviously that's a completely different situation, and it changes how we are looking at the 2021 recruiting class. But that is something that I just don't think we'll be able to avoid. If we have a solid recruiting class and a couple guys just go off early in their careers, and maybe we could hope that there's less opportunity for that because upperclassmen are, our primary starters, and there's not these gaping holes in the roster that have to be filled by young guys where they just go crazy and then every team in the country is after them in the transfer portal. There's something about younger players who have the recruiting pedigree but haven't quite shown it yet just because they haven't had the opportunity. They're not really gonna make splashes in the transfer portal like Dominic Lovett did. I just can't help but feel like that's such a unique situation, and one that I don't think you can really fault the coaching staff or anything that's going on behind the scenes there for how much worse that makes the situation look for the 2021 class. It just seems like something that is unavoidable if you find yourself with a young guy who has, the Georges of the world coming after him.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is something that we're just going to have to weather the storm. And just if we do get a couple of elite seasons out of guys, we just take it. I think that Luther Burden maybe can be a catalyst for something that's unique and kind of being a star and sticking around and maybe kind of acting by, leading by example almost of, trying to keep a class together. I think Luther Burden can be obviously special on the field, but special in a more intangible recruiting way and kind of be the glue to hold this pretty special class together that is 22.
And an example of what NIL can do for a Mizzou player. Not everybody will have the same opportunities that he's had, but Missouri is going to be going after players of his caliber that they can point to what he's doing now and be like, yeah, this is the opportunity that is in front of you.
Ryan Wingo.
Yeah, somebody like that maybe.
One kind of interesting thing I wanted to write down, and we talked about a lot of these guys like on our journey through all of those classes, but just to reiterate what a crapshoot the quarterback recruiting has been since 2013. We've talked about just this incredible lineage of quarterbacks that we had the pleasure of watching, in the previous decade, and they just kind of handed the baton off to one another, and we're great year after year. But we kind of hit a dry spell where, every quarterback we recruited from 2013 through 2021 was Eddie Prince, Trent Hosick, Marvin Zanders, Drew Lock, Jack Lowry, Micah Wilson, Taylor Powell, Lindsey Scott Jr., Connor Bazelak, Brady Cook, and Tyler Macon. So really, out of all of those names, the only meaningful player is Drew Lock, and obviously he played for 3.5 seasons. But, and maybe this is where I'm thinking it's a little bit depressing to think about it, because it's just probably a mistake to get your expectations worked up whenever we get a new quarterback commit. And because it's just exciting because of what it could be.
Yeah.
But also, like, the chances of it hitting are historically low. I do think some of the quarterback recruits we've brought in the last couple of classes are significantly better players than pretty much all of these players. So that's encouraging for sure.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. So, like, when we're talking about Sam Horn and Jabari Johnson waiting in the wings, it's so interesting to contrast the approach that Coach Drink is taking with the quarterbacks to, like, Gary Pinkel, those days, like you were alluding to, of just having this perfectly planned, what seemingly after the fact, perfectly planned passing of the torch each time, to the extent that it was like, hey, Mizzou fans, here's the next starting quarterback. Watch him play a series every game. And look, not that much drop off. Now he's going to go back on the bench and your starter's going to come out and win the game. And seeing that happen year after year, recruiting class after recruiting class, I'm just now coming to terms with the fact that was not normal. And that as a Mizzou fan, I never should have gotten used to that. But the time that I was a young boy and I was watching Mizzou football, and that's just how they did it. So I just thought that would never end.
It was just the good old days, right?
Yeah, exactly. But it's crazy how just like the timing of quarterback recruiting can just like throw everything off. Mm-hmm. Like having too many guys too close to each other in age and like class year just kind of messes everything up, because they're going to look around this room and be like, we're all about the same age and I have not won the starting job 2 years in a row. I got to get out of here.
Yeah. Yeah, it just causes this ambiguity for them and for the fans and, to some extent, maybe even the coaches, because they're just like, I guess we'll just pick the guy that plays best in fall camp.
Yeah.
And that's a little dangerous.
And try to have like complete faith in him. Try to have complete unwavering faith in him.
When things don't go that well in the season.
Yeah. But what else are you going to do? You can't. I mean, that's not a spot I want to be in,
right?
Honestly.
Yeah, it's like you can't put all your eggs in one basket, but also, yes, whenever you've got 2 or 3 guys battling that are all pretty even, you definitely create this ambiguity.
And the 2023 class, it's worth mentioning. I've got 5 4-star players in the 2023 class. So after 2021, even with the guys that have left and the guys that have not panned out, you got 2 recruiting classes back to back that are still better than most of these years that we've discussed. And we've talked before, it is interesting how, like, under Drink, the top of the list every year has been like tight end, quarterback, wide receiver. And so we are kind of like stacking guys at positions where we're already deep. And that helps when Dominic Lovett leaves, but it kind of makes it interesting for some of these other positions.
Yeah, it feels like tight end should be coming around any one of these years now would be great.
And it's not shocking that we keep having to bring in transfer guys out of the transfer portal for offensive line and defensive line.
Yeah.
Because the ones we're getting haven't been at the top of the list.
Right.
And they're not all staying and developing.
Right. But think about that transfer haul before last season, like last offseason. I mean, just a couple of names off the top of my head, like Tyron Hopper, Joseph Charleston, Jernigan. I mean, instant starters who played a role all season long. And you're telling me that we can do that in a year? Like
apparently, because Cameron Johnson
exactly
coming in, going to be starter day 1 on the offensive line.
Exactly. And that's what makes me just be okay with give me my 35% hit rate and we'll figure it out.
Yeah. And what was the percentage even with projections for 2021?
2022, 40%. Or 2021,
yeah.
30%.
Yeah. So even with everything, it's still like roughly worse than what we would want to see year after year, but not
just those big players sting a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think if we want to be recruiting with the big boys and be like top 20 classes every year,
it's a trade-off you'll take.
Kind of comes with the territory. I mean, how many Ohio State wide receivers have transferred out of the program and done incredible things? How many, NFL quarterbacks switched college teams and then still went on to be top picks in the NFL?
Yep.
Yeah, it's kind of it's interesting to my biggest takeaway from looking at all these classes in a row is just how it perfectly maps onto the overall college football landscape and how things have changed over the years. And whether or not Coach Drinkwitz puts everything together on the field and gets us to like 8 wins this year, gets us in that SEC East conversation with Georgia, pulls off a couple of marquee wins, whether or not that happens, it still seems like tell me if you disagree, but it seems to me like the caliber of player that we're bringing in each year, including the transfer portal, is what it needs to be to build the type of team that the stars can align and we can have a special season.
Yeah, I think so.
There's still confidence that we're in that area.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of talent they're bringing in is just a different caliber than we've seen before the Drink era. And what happens after they have an elite season, whatever. But they still should be given credit for bringing in guys like Dominic Lovett, Mekhi Wingo, and allowing them to, like, kind of giving them the opportunity and the platform to have the season they had. I think you still have to give the coaching staff some credit, even though it didn't end how we wanted it to. There's just nothing you could do about it.
We just need it to turn into 8 wins or so this year. That would sure help.
Yeah.
Any other final thoughts on that?
I don't think so.
It's kind of a fun exercise.
That was really fun. Going down memory lane for sure.
Yeah.
It's weird how many of these names like still just kind of stick around in your head all these years later.
Yeah, I think the 2012 recruiting class sticks out a ton because I have multiple times entered these players' names into NCAA Football 14.
Oh yeah, for sure.
To get the roster as accurate as possible.
It's almost time to start thinking about that.
Oh yeah, I'm ready to start.
Almost
playing.
Time to start doing my yearly. Spending way too much time doing things that don't matter at all on NCAA 14.
Yeah, I was trying to see if there's any names. Ish Witter, you mentioned being a borderline hit. I feel like if you got his best season at Mizzou, if you got that out of every 3-star running back that comes our way, I'd be pretty satisfied with that.
He was
the offense was pretty bad that year, though.
Oh yeah, he was a definition of that one cut back. He just had that one little juke move. Just plant his foot.
Undersized, a little bit of an understatement.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if you got anything out of that, let us know.
Yeah. Who'd we miss? Who was a hit that we didn't say? Or
Does this make you feel better about the situation, worse
Yeah.
about the situation? Let us know. Exactly the same. Switching gears a little bit here to college basketball. Basically all bad news. Matthew Cleveland committed to Miami. Jimmy Bell committed to Mississippi State. And there's a rumor swirling about Kobe Brown. So Matthew Cleveland, Jimmy Bell, we're not getting either one of those guys. Were you surprised by either one of those? And how disappointed are you now?
well, here I was again, kind of like the Caden Shedrick situation, where it felt like, okay, all these boxes are being checked. It seems like we are the perfect destination. He goes somewhere else. I kind of started to feel that way about Matthew Cleveland a little bit. He goes somewhere else. So, by the time his announcement rolled around, I think we already knew he was going to Miami. But I think I was slightly surprised. I kind of felt like we were the favorites there. That's disappointing. Jimmy Bell, can't even say that I cared that much, but I was surprised that he canceled his visit to Mizzou today and committed to Mississippi State.
Yeah. Matthew Cleveland, we kind of talked about last week how Miami is throwing a lot of money around. But one thing that I took for granted that I realized after he posted his commitment, transferring from Florida State to Miami, a little bit of a weird thing to do. The Florida State fans were very, very not happy about it. I think they would have felt a lot better if he had gone to Mizzou or, anybody else that's not like in the same state and a conference rival. They were even posting pictures of him doing the Miami U symbol upside down after, I guess, he hit a game winner against them last year. That's like a Dominic Lovett situation.
Yeah.
You're like, you were supposed to help us beat this team,
Exactly.
not join them.
Yes, that's like one of those like reality checks where it's like, oh yeah, money trumps everything.
Yeah.
These players don't care about these like amateurism like rivalries that we literally lose sleep over and all this stuff. Like they don't care.
Yeah.
And that's kind of tough for a lot of us to face. I'm not gonna lie. And maybe that's not true for everybody, but for a lot of players, that's we're throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially their way. They don't care about the Florida State Miami rivalry anymore.
Well, and caring about it when you're on the
In the heat
floor
of the moment.
playing a basketball game is different than when it's the off season and
Sure.
you're trying to figure out your future.
Exactly.
But Jimmy Bell to Mississippi State, yeah, you said everything we need to say there, I think.
Like unimpressive, and then I thought we were going to get him and they didn't, so it's like,
Yeah.
okay, whatever.
Yeah.
What's going on with Kobe Brown, Cameron?
Well, I'll tell you what's going on with Kobe Brown is Twitter is bored. Too many people on Twitter want to be insiders and just want to get the rumor mill spun up about absolute nonsense that's never going to happen.
So you're telling me there's absolutely nothing to these rumors?
Well, how would I know, first of all? Second of all, I sure hope there's not because
I shouldn't have asked that.
these rumors, the rumor on Twitter is that Kobe Brown is going to enter the transfer portal and transfer to Kentucky.
Yeah.
No, no, thank you. And
What did I just say about money?
No.
Okay. This is all I'm going to say is I don't think Kobe I think Kobe plays at Mizzou next year or he's in the NBA.
Yeah.
Is there a scenario where he enters the transfer portal? Yes. And still returns to Missouri? Yes.
If he enters the transfer portal,
Enters the transfer portal and goes somewhere else? Yes. I think all of those options are on the table. I think that's the least likely option, really, that he goes to the transfer portal and actually goes somewhere else.
if there's a Kobe Brown announcement of I am taking my name out of the NFL and NBA draft process, and I'm entering my name in the transfer portal, I will die.
He missed the NFL draft already. It's over.
Well, he can't be drafted in the NFL, but if he removes his name from the NBA draft and at the same time announces he's entering the transfer portal,
He'll die.
I will not be able to handle it.
No, I won't either.
So it can't happen.
I've legitimately seen some people say stuff like, I don't know if I can continue to watch college basketball if Kobe Brown goes and plays for another team that's in college.
Maybe in that camp. No,
Like-
I would watch every single Mizzou game, but
I mean, me too, of course. But I mean, that's what we're talking about here is like a top 5 most beloved Missouri basketball player in 20, 30 years, maybe. Like just going somewhere else and playing. Like, no, you can't do that.
can't happen.
I refuse to believe that Kobe Brown will do that to us. But then also I hear things like there's potentially like 6-7 figure deals on the table. And I start to think about the fact that we're not watching the product that maybe we thought we were 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah. Last week, Kobe Brown said, it's not about NIL. He said it's not about NIL. If I return to Mizzou, it's because I love Mizzou, not because of the money. I don't want to think about it.
I mean, we've already
spent too much time on these random rumors.
we got to survive another couple days. I think the deadline to enter the transfer portal is very soon, like within the next 24, 48 hours.
Okay, I didn't even realize
there could
that.
be an announcement that that follows that period, just the paperwork and all that stuff. But I think we only need to survive a few more days. I think we're all gonna look back at this and laugh, hopefully, and not look back and laugh at what I just said.
Well, just now on this podcast is the most worked up I have been about this, and the most worked up I'm going to be about this. I'm putting it behind me. It's not happening, and the rumor mill on Twitter needs to settle. It needs to settle down, and I need to just stay off Twitter.
Okay,
but we'll be fine. We'll be fine.
Okay, we're moving forward.
Moving forward with the end of the show, I guess. Does that sound right?
Sounds right to me.
Okay, well, let's get out of here. Special thank you to our Patreon supporters at the $10 level and above. Britt Treese, Brian Smith, Ryan Demore, Tristan, Ben Smith, Parker, Daddy JD, Tim Keynes, Tyler Harsel, Brandon Garofalo, Brandon Hanks, Matthew Tillich, and Cooper Boyer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We love you more than life itself. You can listen to this podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We're on Twitter at Mizzou Sports Pod, and you can email us at MissouriSportsPod@gmail.com.
You can find our t-shirts and stickers on our online shop, MissouriSportsPod.BigCartel.com.
If you couldn't tell, we can hear the music now. We couldn't previously. That's why we're nodding our head more. Thank you everyone for listening. We will see you next week.